One of the key themes of the program today is going to be this underlying conversation around leadership. So we're going to kick off with our first panel, really focusing exclusively on leadership. The panel is called Effective Leadership, the Most Powerful Tool in Your Transformation Journey. It'll be moderated by David Blankenhorn, the Chief Technology Officer from DLT. So David will introduce the rest of the panelists. So David and the panelists can go ahead and come up on stage.
Which way are we calling left?
I don't know. He said
left.
Which way's left?
It's all good.
Stage left?
Stage left?
Great. So my name is Dave Blankenhorn. I'm the CTO of DLT, and I want to thank you all for your time today, and I especially want to thank our panelists today. I'm excited to be up here to moderate this discussion. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. I have next to me here, I have Merritt Baer, who is a Principal Security Architect at Amazon Web Services. Next, right, we have Roat, who is the CIO of the Small Business Administration. And then we have Sherri Sokol, who is the innovator of innovation at the Defense Intelligence Systems Agency. So I want to, Information Systems Agency, sorry. I want to welcome all of you, and maybe we can spend a minute quickly kind of talk a little bit about what each of you, your roles within the agencies and within industry as well. So Sherri, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sherri Sokol. I'm with Defense Information Systems Agency in our Emerging Technology Directorate. I'm the agency's blockchain lead, and I also support newly cloud-based internet isolation, assured identity, and universal transport. And that's enough to cover me.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Great. Maria?
Good morning. My name is Roat. I'm the CIO for the Small Business Administration. I've been there just over 3 years, and we are undergoing just a huge transformation around tech across the entire agency.
Great. And Merritt?
Hi, my name is Merritt Baer. I'm a Principal Security Architect at AWS, Amazon Web Services. We're a large cloud provider, and I work with the Fortune 100 companies, C-suites on security around their cloud adoption. So happy to, open when we get to dialogue, happy to talk about lessons learned and correlation with public sector and private. And obviously these days there's a lot of conversation about security equities back and forth, and as private sector owns and operates the landscape, who's going to own some of these problems. So looking forward to a good discussion.
Great, thank you very much. Cool, well, let's kick it off. So given that the panel we're focusing on leadership being the most powerful tool within transformation, let's define some terms. Let's start off with, okay, what does digital transformation mean kind of to each of you, your agencies, and clients you've worked with? So Maria, you want to start that one off?
Yeah, digital transformation. If you look it up, there's probably 100 definitions of that, right? So,
yep.
For the Small Business Administration, when I came on board, the agency was certainly in a technical deficit or debt of more than 10 years, way behind the curve on technology. So when you talk about digital transformation, being able to walk into an agency and essentially get handed a greenfield, and I'm like, yes, this is cool. But being able to take the agency from, where email used to be down for 3 weeks at a time, really leapfrogging and taking some very big steps around modernization, everything from the infrastructure all the way through the application stack. So all the way through the entire stack and touching every piece of the enterprise, and not just, focused on technology, but how, thinking in the long term, about how that change is going to affect the mission, what the mission is of SBA, serving those 30 million small businesses and entrepreneurs across the country, but really looking across the agency and how is technology enabling that mission. So over the last 3 years, knowing where the mission is, what they need to do, and from where I sit as the CIO, it's actually kind of cool because I can see across the whole agency, and where there's been these stovepipes across the whole agency, being able to see across the agency so that the technology is enabling across the board. So we've just taken some really big steps on, not just the infrastructure, moving the Ethernet, but all the way through getting rid of our legacy applications and laying out, the data architecture for the future.
I can imagine, though, that amount of change has got to be scary for a lot of people.
You have no idea.
Sherri.
Yeah, for us, digital transformation is relevancy, and because DISA is the IT combat support agency for our mission partners, it means so much more. So it is transforming everything from infrastructure on up and being able to sort of profess that value proposition across the agency so that everyone's got that willingness to pitch in and help out and get a little uncomfortable and move forward.
Great. And Merritt, given your interactions with industry, what do you see as kind of being the major drivers for digital transformation? How are your customers looking at digital transformation? What do they hope to get out of that?
Yeah, well, AWS came out of Amazon itself, realizing in 2006 that they had built this core capability in building really large-scale physical infrastructure. So, the basic premise of cloud is that someone else maintains your data centers from the concrete floor up to the hypervisor. The security of that, but also just the operational capability is managed by your cloud provider. What that means in practice is that our customers then, and Amazon.com we consider to be one of our largest customers, then experience technology on an on-demand basis, and it looks like a command line interface. And what that means is that we're now talking about infrastructure as code and security as code. And so it actually changes the way that you do business, the way that you approach, Parm mentioned, the cultural transformation that is part of this. So a lot of my conversations day to day involve folks who are excited about the productivity and the development side of this, whatever industry they're in, from high tech, automotive, healthcare, et cetera. DoD and civilian agencies are among our customers as well. So whatever their core business mission is, that they are excited to be able to do more, better, faster, with more flexibility to spin up and down resources, is great. And that is usually the driver towards that transformation. However, the conversations about getting there require a change in approach, and certainly the security conversations look different. We're talking about, whether your crypto is correct and whether you're, using formal methods in math, for example, that you could know network reachability without sending a single packet. So it looks a lot more like a cultural shift when you're thinking about the infrastructure as code reality.
Right. And looking at transformations, I think probably one of the most exciting and really revolutionary transformations I saw was actually in Amazon in the mid-2000s, where the edict came down from on high and said everything will have an API. This was Jeff Bezos said you will all have an API for every service that you put out there. And talk about laying the super highway for that digital transformation is if everything has an API, everything is accessible via code, which is tremendously powerful, and that's really the foundation for a lot of the way AWS works, which is pretty impressive. So let's move to the second part of that equation, leadership. Really, what are there's really no great job description for what a leader might be. But what are the characteristics, what are the attributes of a leader, specifically one that's going to help really drive digital transformation within our customers and agencies? So do you want to start off with that one?
Sure. I think that, one of the elements that Parm wanted to bring into this room is an appreciation for leadership at whatever angle one owns. And so certainly I think it helps to get in, if you are someone who wants to affect large pieces of a digital transformation or whatever, element of the work that you're trying to do, it helps to be in a position where you can make decisions. However, a factor in leadership up and down the chain of command, if you will, is that ownership over whatever you're working on, the fact that you never say it's not my job. And I think that the folks who have drifted into leadership positions often have explicitly set out to have a high ROI for their time. It's hard to say. This is one of those, because there's different leadership styles, there's different opinions on what makes a good leader. And I hate to come back to a Justice White, you know it when you see it. But sometimes that is the case. I think that ownership over the elements that you can control and kind of the Churchillian, do what you can with what you have where you are approach is one that I try to take, but with a long-term view. So Jeff has also said stuff like, we want to be determined about the outcome, but flexible about how we get there. So understanding that things may look different and that incorporating, for example, diversity of perspective will be one way to make sure that you have incorporated elements of different approaches into your how do we get there strategy is one element that I think we can draw upon.
Yep. Sherri.
Yeah, I think very similarly, it's having that clear vision, but empowering people to figure out how to get there. It's being a good listener and being tolerant of some risk, not making perfect the enemy of good. And it's really being willing to, I think, just like you said, to own it. The good, the bad, the extra work, the strategic alignment, the value proposition, making sure that you have everyone going along with you.
Now, you bring up a great point that I think is often underrepresented, and that is leaders don't always have to be right. And that being open to new and different ideas is actually one of the more powerful attributes that a leader might have.
Yeah, and I think being open to tolerate failure that you can learn from, fail fast, learn fast.
Okay, great. Maria.
To add on to what you just said, my team, they are way smarter than me. They're an amazing team. So when you talk about building that out and doing those kind of things, and from a leadership perspective, what you've both said, anybody who's been in the military, right? You get promoted, you go to leadership class, right? What's the first thing you do? You get a flip chart. Everybody gets a marker. What's a leader? Right? Yeah. Everybody writes it down, what makes a good leader. And this kind of comes back to what you said, that there's so many different things and what makes a leader. And sometimes you can't put your finger on it, but it's about what you said, getting things done, enabling your people, empowering them, the diversity. It's all of those things. And different leaders bring different strengths to the table. And, having a team, my team's awesome. And they come back to me sometimes like, that's a really bad idea. You don't want to do that. But being able to listen and take their advice, and you go, okay, well, what if we did this? Or, being open to those things.
Having your eye on the prize, but being able to take different paths to get to it ultimately. Terrific. So speaking back to digital transformation and leading our agencies and customers towards that, what are the biggest inhibitors? And I think we've already started touching on this, but what are really the biggest inhibitors to this digital transformation?
People.
Those yucky humans,
okay, I'm
right?
done. No, it's you can do technology all day long, right? We can build stuff. We can do technology all day long, but when you like I did coming into an organization where cloud was a foreign concept, and I right off the bat said nothing new in the data center because it was failing. Everything's going to the cloud because we've got this environment that nobody's using, and we're paying for it. So what that culture and that shift and that change, and it's the people getting them trained up, getting them on the bus with you, on that vision, on that shared vision that says over the next 3 years, here is what we're going to be working on, and here's where we're headed for the agency, and bringing people along. And it's not just not just buying into the vision, but training people, enabling them, giving them the tools in their tool belt to be able to do the work to help and really drive the change. And I think doing things differently forces that culture change. You don't just say, we're going to change the culture. Changing the culture is about doing things differently, right? We have a saying at SBA, we talk about, we're burning the bridges behind us so people can't go back, right? We're not doing that anymore. You can't go back. That doesn't exist. That bridge is gone. We're going this direction. So you change the culture by doing things differently and sometimes burning those bridges behind you.
That's a good point, because there's no going back now. It's only going forward.
Yeah.
So communication is clearly probably one of the more critical elements. Getting everyone having a shared sense of vision in terms of where you're heading, where your goals are. Sherri, what are some of your experiences?
I think being held accountable for no.
Okay.
That right now, if anyone says no anywhere along the chain of any process, that's fine. No, there's no repercussion for that.
Right.
And trying to get to a point of how do we get to yes? Let's work together to get to yes is a huge shift for folks. Being able to compromise and kind of be in it together, to learn from one another, to understand, the different parts of the process and what the constraints are and how to creatively work within those constraints so that everybody gets what they want is definitely something we are trying to get to.
Right. So that whole change is scary, and how do we kind of overcome that fear of the unknown? I mean, I remember many years ago, one of my mentors, I made the flippant comment of, well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And he quickly admonished me and said, well, if we didn't reinvent the wheel, we'd all be on stone wheels. And I took that to heart. It's like, yeah, you're right. We need to be reinventing what we're doing. We need to keep iterating on this to keep improving it. How about your experiences with either with Amazon or some of your customers?
Yeah, so I take Sherri's point to heart. I think one of the first conversations I have is like, what are you doing now? You have a security posture. You are literally and metaphorically paying for it. What are you doing now? And I think that there's a bias for inaction because folks perceive there to be a risk of moving. Well, there's a risk of staying, and there are costs associated with it. And there are certainly opportunity costs, but there are also real tangible costs. So that's one of the drivers that I think I try to employ. Amazon is an interesting place because, as you all know, there are always these onion cartoons about the sky opens up and you realize you've been in Amazon the whole time, which is, a funny too soon kind of joke because it is so far-reaching. And the reason that we have our hands in so many different industries, from Whole Foods to Ring Doorbell to AWS, which is kind of this invisible infrastructure that most people don't spend a lot of time thinking about, the fact that your, healthcare and your government and your, industrial control systems are actually running on cloud a lot of times, or at least are moving in that direction. One of the reasons we have so many industrial elements is that we are a process-driven company. So it is not about the product, it is about the process of development. And a lot of the conversations we have with customers are about how Amazon does business. And so this takes the form of everything from, we believe strongly in written narratives. So one way to circulate ideas to leadership is write it down coherently, and whether it's a one-pager or something like a six-pager is the max. Anticipating what a PR FAQ would be for your press release when this were to come to market. And, so things like that are very specific process-driven elements of how we decide to spend our days as humans that are part of the enterprise, and then process-driven as part of the technology as well. So, automating everything that you can. You referred to the fact that everything now is an API call. Right, so that means that everything shows up in CloudTrail. That means that you can now know whether the automations that you have written are doing what you think they do. It's easier to lose 5 pounds than 30, so start automating and let that breed a culture of automation. Hire people who get addicted to that kind of work. These are process-driven, and of course the technology itself is relevant in what it allows you to do or how it shifts your thinking about those processes. But ultimately, I think one of the elements that we try to impart to customers, or that customers are eager to kind of grab from Amazon as a way of doing business, is to have that process in place and have it be something that is mechanizable, even when it is human processes, to have it be someone's job. We have a distinguished engineer, Eric Brandwine, who says, if it's not someone's job, it's a hope, and a hope is not a plan. So turning things into mechanisms by which you can predictably expect that they will happen.
I think one neat technique that I believe Amazon leverages is, one of the things you do first is write the press release.
Yep.
So what does success look like? How do you announce that to the world? And then that becomes kind of that North Star in terms of how you move all the resources forward, the people and the process and the tooling, to kind of move all that forward. Because your press release is that North Star. It's how do you announce this? What does end state look like? So.
We have had some big failures. Many of you may or may not remember the Fire phone, for example. It didn't work, but what we ended up with was the realization that we had built an Amazon Echo, and Alexa now is omnipresent in cars and other devices and your kitchens. So, I mean, part of this was also the fact that Peter Thiel, aside from his debatable personal life and reputation, has a good concept called 0 to 1 innovation, where he talks about the need to think in terms of things that do not yet exist, rather than 1 to 2 innovation. And I think anytime you're getting kind of radical new ideas, you can expect that they will sometimes fail. And frankly, I think the direction that we are now taking and take this from this what you will. Our leadership message has been, maybe we're not taking enough risks anymore. Maybe we should be encouraging failure more and meaning it when we say that. So that is the current kind of messaging that we're getting, is do more prototyping, do more pushing boundaries of what we can do. And I think that the tolerance for that and the willingness of a set of leaders, that make up your entity, whether it's a government or private sector organization, that tone gets set from the top in terms of what the tolerance is for big ideas, for failures. And of course, no one sets out to fail. The idea is that you take big risks because you have ideas that are worth pursuing.
Now, the two of you brought up failure so far, and I think failure is a big part of our jobs, which is a really weird thing to say, and I'm really good at failing, actually. But how do you measure the positive impact of failure? How do you actually embrace failure as a positive? I think this is a relatively new thing within industry, and I think especially within government, is that government cannot fail. That's been the mantra. I remember I watched Greenspan speaking one day, and he says, all the commercial people in the audience, there's something you need to understand with government. If your company fails, what happens? Well, some people may owe some money, some people have to update their resumes, but what happens if government fails? So there's this mentality that government cannot fail. So how do you change that within government to embrace failure as part of that evolutionary process? So Marie, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I'll give you, I guess, a couple examples. I guess about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, inheriting this network that was architected many, many years ago, we were bringing things up to
Very
current
politely
operating.
said, I might add.
What's that?
Very politely said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were upgrading and trying to bring things at least to current operating levels on the network and the network devices. Well, they were rolling it out, and they made a change over here. Should have had nothing to do with anything way over here, but because something happened 5 or 6 years ago, this thing's been running forever. And it took down the entire network.
Nice.
And to resolve that took calling the vendor for this thing over here, and they said, that should have never worked like that. And we said, it's been running like that for 6 or 7 years, and they were scratching their head. And we had to undo it, but we took down the entire network for that. And what we did was we learned from it. I didn't shoot anybody. We rolled it back and said, okay, figure it out, fix this thing before we make this change again. But not shooting the messenger, right? Not shooting the folks that are making it, just fix it and let's move on. Fortunately, it was over a weekend, yay. Nobody really noticed because it was a quiet weekend. But we still took down the whole network, which is not a good thing to do. But in the second example, we rolled out, this year I've got a huge focus on a lot of our smaller legacy applications. I want them off the network this year, gone, gone, gone. Some of these are 15 and 20 years old. I want them off, period. So this weekend, one of them that was held together with bubble gum, duct tape, baling wire, it was really bad. And we've got a whole modernization effort around this thing, and it'll be a bigger platform, but it's not coming up live till next quarter. But we had to do something with this thing. So what we did was we spun it up in the cloud to get it off the old hardware, and we did that over this weekend. And not everything worked perfectly. It came up, and then people were logging in, the users were logging in on Tuesday, and the names that were coming up as associated with their login, there was something not right in one of the scripts on this whole, and so we had to take it back down again and go back and fix it. But the team's working on it, and they're fixing it. And then they also set expectations so I can communicate to leadership that says it's going to take us about 2 hours to fix it. It'll be down, we'll put a splash page up, but not shooting people, you know. I had something happen about 6 months ago, and one of the executives put in an email to me and then said, "Are you writing that person up?" And, you know, I politely didn't reply to the email. And no, I didn't write somebody up because it was something, stuff happens. It wasn't a stupid mistake. It was just something that happened in the course of a job. You learn from it and you move on. So no, I'm not going to write somebody up for this other thing that happened. Right. So I see it time and time again, you know, unless somebody's being a complete idiot or does something really stupid, you know, that's different. But there's stuff that's going to happen every day, day in and day out. You know, just this weekend, a few months ago, 2 years ago. But learn from it. Don't do that again. Build on it and move on.
That's great advice. Sherri, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Tell us about your failures.
it's exactly the same thing I say to my daughter. The only guarantee I can give you is you're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. Things are going to go wrong. What matters is what you do next. Mm-hmm. And that's really it. And that's the conversation we've started having at the agency is, you know, being able to look at some of the work that we do and categorize the work, whether it's experimental or it's kind of everyday operations or it's a tasking as part of more of a complex process, and what sort of risk tolerance we have for each sort of category. And then going along with that, when there are failures, seeing, is there a root cause analysis? Has that been done? What was the root cause? Did it result in learning? Did it result in a process change? Has something been designed to perhaps implement now a new method or approach or technology shift? Have we learned that new skills need to be acquired? And so really trying to see at the program level sort of what happened and why, and are we doing things to move forward, and then sort of taking that strategic view and saying, are there patterns of failure across the agency, and what can we do about that if we're seeing things like that?
I was going to say, we do hot washes all the time. Mm-hmm. So after this weekend and the rollout, I know I've got a whole bunch more systems. We do hot washes all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great technique. Thoughts?
We seem to be sort of conflating the term failure when we're referring to like network failure and failure when it refers to like human error or other things that didn't work. And I do think those are distinct concepts, although they may be both. On the leadership tolerance for failure, I think that we've described this a little bit. It gets to be kind of a trope where people talk about startups saying fail fast, and the reality is obviously like no one sets out to fail. So these should be smart failures, like uses of your ability to recover from failure that are calculated and that you can turn into something usable, so that fire phone technology actually became something else, et cetera. And I think when you are process driven instead of specifically product driven, your outcomes can vary, and what looks like a failure could also look like something that's pivoted. On the network failure side, we have lots to talk about because people are always coming to us as AWS and saying, what do we do about if a region is down, if critical infrastructure is dependent on it, et cetera. And our CTO, Werner Vogels, has a pet phrase of his, which is everything fails all of the time. So architecting for failure, and I guess you could use this in the metaphorical sense too, right? But basically that part of grown-up IT or cyber or whatever term you want to use, operations, is architecting for failure. And that to the extent that you consider security to be that CIA triad of integrity and availability, then you need to include the part where you think about the ability to sustain through failure as just good architecture. And part of this is that integration of culture into what, I know everyone hates the term, but what we might refer to as DevSecOps, where it becomes, security becomes everyone's job, and by that token, so does availability, so do all these elements that require folks to share each other's fate. And good leadership has a sense of that, but it certainly requires each expert to come to the table and kind of reacquaint them with realities of what is the art of the possible as far as we can see it from where we are. And so weaving those together, I think we certainly see it literally with cloud architectures in terms of how we try to counsel folks to architect for resilience.
So let's flip the coin now and let's talk about wins. All right, we talked about failure and how do you learn from that and how do you embrace it as an opportunity for change and improvement. But wins. So in my early administrative operations data center management days, I had the fortunate experience of working with a pretty crafty individual. And he pointed out to me that IT, security, anything to do really with IT, we're awesome at pointing out all the things that we do wrong. Okay, world, this system was down for 3 hours and 47 minutes. It was because Joe fumble-fingered something on a router. We go in excruciating detail about everything that we happen to get wrong. But when's the last time we sent out a missive saying, hey folks, these 87 systems have now been up for 3 years with 5 nines of availability. We don't often advertise what we do well. And I think it goes back to communication, is that if we expect the mission, the business, the users to trust us, I think we need to communicate success more often even than we communicate the failures, because I think we have more successes that we're not talking about. So with that kind of framing it, how do we talk about the little wins? Do we talk about the little wins? And how should we celebrate these kinds of wins? Because I think they should be celebrated to really kind of reinforce all the goodness that we are doing, and especially in the cyber world. It doesn't apply just to IT, but cyber as well. There's a lot of gloom and doom around, oh, wow, the bad guys have all this great technology and they don't have to follow the rules and boo-hoo. But we're not talking about all the good things that we're doing to stop all these bad actors. Where are the successes? Where are the wins? How are we talking about these things? So kind of framing that out, who wants to take a whack at that one?
Celebrating successes. I brought in a big sheet cake yesterday.
Nice.
I had the giant bakery near me. They scratch their heads sometimes. I had them put 0 in big capital letters across a great big huge sheet cake, and trim it out and whatever. And I brought it in yesterday. We celebrated a little win. We went from, I think it was 48 OIG audit findings at the start of the last fiscal year. We closed every single one of them, and they're starting their fiscal year with 0 audit findings for OIG this year.
Woo-hoo.
Huge. That's a little win. But it took everybody, and at 12:30 yesterday, I brought the sheet cake, threw it in our conference room, and brought everybody in, our feds, our contractors, everybody, and cut it up. And it was just a little thing, and yeah, we did. One of my folks tweeted it out yesterday, which was great. But it's little things like that. We did the same thing earlier this year when we, as we're shutting down our data center. I brought in a big cake that said RIP on it, rest in peace. We put on there, and I put all of it on there. And just little things like that make a huge difference. It's not just cake, but other stuff.
Right.
It makes a big difference. It's just a little something, and we're celebrating it. And if the administrator and leadership can come down, great. If they can't, fine. But we're having it anyway.
That's awesome. I think it's critical that we kind of reinforce.
And we talk about the little wins. Yesterday one of my folks tweeted it out, but you got to talk about them so other people outside your little organization know about it. We have Yammer. I put stuff up on there all the time. Hey, cool, look what so-and-so did. Hey, look at, some of these other things, when they're doing some stuff with like Power BI. And hey, cool, showcasing that. Yeah, that's little wins.
That's critical, absolutely. Sherri.
Yeah, that's huge. It's talking about it. It's recognizing it at meetings, even smaller ones to organizational ones, going out and talking with folks outside your agency and promoting what things have happened at any size and scale. It's a lot of that, I think, recognition and letting folks take the ownership of the great work they've done and putting that out there.
Yeah, for us, I think, as I mentioned, not that Amazon is any shrinking violet. I could give you the stats about how we're a $33 billion run rate at AWS this year, and all the indicators that folks trust us and are using AWS, which is important. But I think one of the things that I've come back to is like the importance of storytelling. So saying that healthcare companies and pharma companies operate on AWS is one thing, but saying, we're moving from generalized to particularized and personalized medicines, that folks who were spending 30 days on clinical trials are now spending 30 seconds because they can run modeling in sim, they can do burst cluster computing, the kinds of tangible benefits that we're seeing for folks that they are able to get because we are enabling those wins. It takes storytelling, and I think some of this is fun stuff. So Formula One runs on AWS, and 1,200 sensors on every car, taking in
Terabytes.
Yeah, every second. And part of the fun of that is that now you can actually follow along as folks try to do informed decision making. So the driver can be saying, do I need to make a pit stop and sacrifice those fractions of seconds, or can I push through? Those kinds of decision making junctures have actually changed the participation in the sport for fans, because you get to see as they kind of look at the data over time of whether we can expect them to have that outcome. I'm an amateur boxer by hobby, so those kinds of fractions of seconds matter, and I think that it's fascinating, right? The way that we interact with the world differently. So part of this is just having that capability to make it matter to people to tell a story.
Great. So we're coming up to the end of our time here, and I want to do kind of a final round closing thoughts around how can all the leaders in the audience, whether it's in their job description, which it probably isn't, whether it's expected of them given their title, or whether individual contributors with big ideas and want to really make positive impact, how can some of the leaders or future leaders in the audience begin to start making a difference, begin to start making an impact? Maria.
Okay. As a closing thought, take risk, enable your folks, your team, your leadership, your staff, everybody to take risk, allow that safety net for it. I think that's huge. Just that ability to take risk, and prudent risk, but still take risk, step outside comfort zones, and allow your folks to be able to do that with that safety net.
Mm-hmm. And have thick skin.
What's that?
And have thick skin, right?
And have thick skin, yeah.
Merritt?
There's a good phrase that I heard that was like, if your leader asks you for loyalty, give her integrity. If she asks you for integrity, give her loyalty. I think that having a North Star of your own is really helpful. So contributing what you can to your organization that you're in, but also having a broader footprint. Being informed about what's happening on the landscape, being someone who can zoom out, that will be something that you lend to your organization, but also something that serves you as an individual. I basically try to determine how to spend my life based on what would make it worth it. If I weren't doing security, I think I'd be doing public health. And I think if your calculus is how can I make an impact, or what are the ways that I can consider my ROI as a human, one of the ways to do that, I think, is to continue to educate yourself, write, talk, teach, and have the ability to lend a broader perspective than whatever your current role is.
Great. Sherri, bring us home.
Yeah, I think that is the looking across and seeing what's on the horizon for future trends, technology, especially in our area, being able to understand across your agency what some of the problems are in your sector, and then being able to add value to those problems, perhaps finding different champions who you can talk to. I always used to say in college, I used to write a paper before, get it done like a week early, turn into the professor, and then the professor would just tell me exactly what he or she wanted, and I'd make those corrections. So before
That would never have occurred to me to actually do a paper early.
I'd still deadline. I'd make a deadline, and still the night before be staying up all night to write it, but I just lied to myself about what that deadline was. When you're going in front of perhaps several seniors, to have the meeting before the meeting. Go through, figure out, well, I'm talking about this. I think this is the value proposition. I think this is the strategic alignment. Bring it to them for 15, 20, 30 minutes and say, am I on the right track? And that way, when you do go to then the big meeting, you know whether you're on the right track and you've already made those corrections. And that's going to help you have a much larger impact much more quickly.
Tremendous advice. Thank you very much. Sherri, Maria, Merritt, thank you all very much for your time today, and look forward to next time. Thank you.